trapped in a crashed escape pod on an abandoned planet until a human picked up her signal. The vast emptiness of space stretched before Brad Cooper's visor as he piloted his stealth ship through the debris field of a long-forgotten battle. His black combat armor, adorned with cutting-edge tech and topped with a mirrored skull-shaped helmet, reflected the distant starlight. The armor had become both his shield and prison over the years, earning him a fearsome reputation among the galaxy's less savory inhabitants. A renowned mercenary, Brad preferred working alone. His clients knew him only by his call sign, Reaper, and his perfect mission completion record. The mysterious human who never showed his face had become something of a legend among alien species, though he cared little for such recognition. As he navigated through the wreckage, a faint sound caught his attention. A woman's cry, barely audible through the emergency channel. His hand hesitated over the comm switch. Distress calls were often traps, and he had a time-sensitive mission to complete. Yet something about this signal seemed different. "Damn it," he muttered, his gravelly voice echoing in his helmet as he altered course. The signal originated from a nearby planet, one of those countless uninhabited rocks that dotted the galaxy's outer rim. His ship's sensors indicated no signs of intelligent life on the surface. The crying continued, interspersed with what sounded like panicked breathing. Brad checked his weapons, force of habit, though his gut told him this wasn't an ambush. As he began atmospheric entry, his ship's scanners detected a small metallic object on the surface. "This better be worth the detour," he growled, not knowing that this simple decision would change his life forever. The black sphere of the escape pod stood out against the planet's reddish soil like a fallen star. As Brad landed his ship nearby, he could see the pod's hull was dented but largely intact. The crying had stopped, replaced by rapid breathing that suggested its occupant was still very much alive. He approached cautiously, his heavy boots leaving deep imprints in the loose soil. The pod's glass viewport was partially frosted over, but he could make out movement inside. When he got closer, his breath caught in his throat. Behind the glass was one of the most striking beings he'd ever encountered. A humanoid woman with emerald skin that seemed to shimmer in the planet's dim sunlight. Her yellow lime eyes were wide with fear, tears streaming down her face. Long black hair fell in slight waves around her shoulders, contrasting sharply with her tight black bodysuit. She pressed her hands against the glass when she saw him, her lips moving in words he couldn't hear. The pod's door was clearly jammed, warped from the impact. "Stand back," he commanded through his helmet's external speakers. The woman flinched at his mechanically filtered voice but complied, pressing herself against the far side of the pod. Brad spotted a sturdy metal rod among the debris scattered around the crash site. He wedged it into the door's seam and threw his augmented strength behind it. The metal groaned in protest, but slowly gave way. The woman scrambled out as soon as the gap was wide enough, then froze when she got her first proper look at him. His skull-shaped helmet probably wasn't the most reassuring sight for someone who'd just survived a crash. Thank you," she said in perfect standard, her voice melodious despite her obvious fear. "I'm Shia." Brad turned away without responding. "Follow me if you want to live. My ship's this way." "Wait!" She hurried after him, her movements graceful despite her recent ordeal. "You can't just walk away without telling me who you are. I mean, you just saved my life." "Reaper, that's all you need to know." She caught up to him, studying his armor with obvious curiosity. "A human, right? I can tell by how you move. Why the scary helmet? Are you hiding something under there?" Brad remained silent, quickening his pace. The sooner he got her to the nearest space station, the sooner he could return to his actual mission. "Oh, the silent treatment?" Shia's fear seemed to have evaporated, replaced by amusement. "That's cute. You know, most species find humans fascinating. All that determination packed into such relatively fragile bodies. Though you don't look very fragile in that armor." He stopped abruptly, causing her to bump into his back. "Listen carefully. I'm not your friend. I'm not your conversation partner. I'm just the guy who's getting you off this rock. Clear?" Shia's lips curved into a mischievous smile. "Crystal clear, my strong, silent savior." Brad suppressed a groan. This was going to be a long trip. The walk to Brad's ship was interrupted by an ominous rumble from the purple-tinged sky above. He glanced at his suit's environmental readings and cursed under his breath. The planet's magnetic field was intensifying rapidly. creating conditions that could wreak havoc on sensitive electronics. "We need to move faster," he growled, lengthening his stride. Shia kept pace easily, her long legs matching his steps. "Worried about the magnetic storm? My people studied phenomena like this. They can be quite devastating to unshielded equipment. My ship is shielded. Against normal magnetic fluctuations, sure. But this, she gestured at the increasingly disturbed atmosphere, where strange lights had begun to dance. "This is something else." As if to prove her point, they crested a ridge to find Brad's sleek black ship partially powered down, its external lights flickering erratically. The main hatch was sealed shut, the emergency backup systems clearly engaged. "Damn it!" He approached the access panel, but the interface remained dark despite his attempts to activate it. "The magnetic interference is stronger than expected." "Told you so," Shia sang, earning herself another helmet-hidden glare. "Oh, don't be like that. I can help. My species has natural resistance to electromagnetic fields. It's why my pod's basic systems stayed functional even after the crash." Brad hesitated, his instincts warring with necessity. Finally, he reached into a compartment on his armor and pulled out a small toolkit. "Fine, the manual override is underneath. We'll need to..." A high-pitched whine cut through the air, followed by the distinctive sound of anti-grav engines. 3 ramshackle vessels appeared over the horizon, their hulls cobbled together from salvaged parts. "Scavengers," Brad spat, pushing Shia behind him. "They must have detected your pod's crash signature. Friends of yours?" Shia pressed closer to his armored back, her breath warm against his neck seals. "Not exactly." He drew his plasma rifle, the weapon humming to life despite the magnetic interference. "Stay close to the ship." The scavenger vessels landed in a triangular formation around them, disgorging a motley crew of various alien species. Most wore mismatched armor and carried an assortment of weapons that looked more dangerous to their users than their targets. Their leader, a bulky Craxian with cybernetic arms, stepped forward. Well, what do we have here? A crashed escape pod and..." His compound eyes focused on Brad's skull helmet. "The infamous Reaper himself. This is turning out to be quite the profitable day." "Walk away," Brad warned, his modulated voice carrying across the windswept terrain. "You know my reputation." The Craxian laughed, a harsh clicking sound. "Oh, we do. But you're outnumbered. Your ship's disabled, and that pretty green thing behind you would fetch a nice price in certain markets. The odds seem in our favor." Shia's fingers dug into Brad's armor. "I'm not going back to being anyone's property," she whispered fiercely. The words made something cold settle in Brad's gut. He'd suspected she was running from something, but hearing the steel in her voice confirmed it. Without taking his eyes off the scavengers, he murmured, "You won't be. Get ready to move when I say." The Craxian raised his cybernetic arm, weapon ports opening along its length. "Last chance, Reaper. Surrender the girl and maybe we'll let you live." Brad's response was a precisely aimed shot that severed the Craxian's augmented limb at the shoulder. The following chaos was exactly what he'd expected and planned for. The scavengers opened fire, their shots wild and uncoordinated. Brad's armor deflected the few that came close, while he methodically picked off the most immediate threats. His enhanced reflexes and combat systems allowed him to track multiple targets simultaneously, turning the firefight into a deadly dance. "Now," he shouted to Shia, who immediately understood his plan. While he provided covering fire, she darted to the ship's access panel, her fingers moving with practiced precision over the manual override. And the magnetic storm actually worked in their favor, disrupting the scavengers' targeting systems, while Shia's natural resistance allowed her to work unimpeded. A lucky shot grazed Brad's shoulder armor, leaving a scorched groove. He returned fire, taking down 2 more attackers. The remaining scavengers began to fall back, their confidence shaken by the sight of their comrades dropping so efficiently. "Got it!" Shia called as the ship's hatch finally opened with a hydraulic hiss. "Inside," Brad ordered, backing toward the ship while maintaining suppressive fire. The scavengers had retreated to their vessels, but he knew better than to assume they were giving up entirely. Once inside, Shia immediately moved to the cockpit, her hands dancing over the controls. "The magnetic interference is playing havoc with the primary systems, but I think I can..." "Yes." The engines hummed to life, though the sound was rougher than normal. Brad sealed the hatch and joined her. "You know how to fly this model?" Please, she smirked, already initiating the launch sequence. I can fly anything. Though your setup is, interesting, very human. All buttons and switches instead of neural interfaces. The scavenger ships were airborne now, moving to block their escape. Shia's smile turned predatory as she gripped the controls. Hold on to something, handsome. This might get a bit rough. Before Brad could protest either the endearment or her taking control of his ship, she sent them into a spiral that somehow threaded between two of the pursuing vessels. The maneuver would have been impressive under normal conditions. During a magnetic storm, it was nothing short of miraculous. That's impossible, he muttered, watching her handle his ship like she'd been flying it for years. Impossible for a human. Maybe. She winked, her yellow-lime eyes sparkling with excitement. My species has enhanced spatial awareness and natural electromagnetic sensitivity. Makes us excellent pilots. Among other things, the suggestive tone in her voice made Brad grateful for his helmet hiding his expression. He focused on the tactical display instead, noting that the scavengers were falling behind, their ship struggling more with the magnetic interference. We're not out of danger yet, he warned. The storm's getting worse. We need to find shelter until it passes. Shia nodded, her playful demeanor sobering slightly. There's a canyon network about 20 kilometers east. The magnetic readings are weaker there, might provide enough shielding for your systems to recover. As they flew toward the canyon, Brad found himself studying her profile. Despite her flirtatious nature, there was clearly more to her than met the eye. Combat-trained reflexes, advanced technical knowledge, exceptional piloting skills. She was full of surprises. You're staring, she said without taking her eyes off the controls. Like what you see. I'm trying to figure out what you really are, he replied honestly. You're no ordinary refugee. Her smile faltered slightly. No, I'm not. But then, you're no ordinary mercenary either, are you? She glanced at him. We all have our secrets, Reaper. Some are just more dangerous than others. The way she said it sent a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the magnetic storm raging outside. The canyon provided natural shelter from both the magnetic storm and potential pursuers. Brad guided the ship into a wide cavern, the rock walls offering additional protection against the electromagnetic interference. As the engines powered down, an almost intimate silence fell over the cockpit. Shia's fingers lingered on the controls, her green skin taking on a deeper hue in the dim emergency lighting. Your ship handled beautifully despite the storm. Humans really do build remarkable machines. You handled it well, Brad admitted, finally allowing himself to relax slightly. He began running diagnostics on his armor systems, which had taken some damage during their escape. A compliment? From the stoic Reaper himself? Shia turned in her seat to face him, her yellow-lime eyes seeming to glow in the darkness. The storm must have affected you more than I thought. Brad ignored her teasing, focusing on removing his damaged shoulder plate. The scorched armor piece had fused slightly, making it difficult to disengage. Before he could stop her, Shia was beside him, her delicate fingers finding the hidden release mechanisms. Let me help, she murmured, her breath ghosting across his helmet. I told you my people are naturally resistant to electromagnetic damage. I can feel where the circuits are most affected. Her proximity was distracting. Even through his armor, Brad could sense the warmth radiating from her body. He remained perfectly still as she worked, trying to maintain his professional demeanor, despite the intimate nature of her assistance. There, she said softly, removing the damaged plate. Her fingers traced the edge of his armor, where it met his bodysuit. You know, you're quite fascinating. Most humans I've encountered are so expressive, but you hide behind this armor, this persona you've created. It's necessary in my line of work. Is it? She moved to face him, those alien eyes searching his mirrored faceplate. Or is it just easier than letting anyone see the real you? The question hit closer to home than he cared to admit. Before he could formulate a response, Shia's hands moved to his helmet. Don't, he warned, catching her wrists. His grip was gentle despite his harsh tone. Why not? She didn't pull away, instead stepping closer. The storm will keep us grounded for hours. The scavengers can't track us here. For once in your life, Brad Cooper, you don't have to be the Reaper. He stiffened at the use of his real name. How did you? I have my sources, she smiled mysteriously. Just as I'm sure you've been trying to figure out who I really am since you found me in that pod. She was right. Despite his best efforts to maintain professional distance, he'd been increasingly intrigued by the contradictions she presented. Her technical knowledge, combat awareness, and the way she carried herself spoke of high-level military or intelligence training. Yet there was a genuine warmth to her, a playful sensuality that seemed at odds with such a background. "Who are you really, Shia? Remove the helmet and I'll tell you." It was a pivotal moment, and they both knew it. Removing his helmet meant dropping more than just a physical barrier. It meant acknowledging the growing connection between them, the electric tension that had been building since their first encounter. Slowly, deliberately, Brad released her wrists. Shia's smile softened as she found the helmet's release mechanisms. There was a soft hiss as the seals disengaged, and then she was lifting it away. The air felt cool on his face. He kept his eyes closed for a moment, suddenly uncertain. When he opened them, Shia's expression made his breath catch. She was studying him with undisguised fascination, her fingers hovering near his cheek. "Your eyes. They're the color of your world's oceans. I've seen images, but..." She traced the scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. "You're beautiful." No one had called him that before. Dangerous, yes. Intimidating, certainly. But beautiful? He almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "You still haven't answered my question," he said, his unmodulated voice rougher than he'd intended. Shia's hand dropped to his chest plate. "I'm a runaway princess," she admitted, though not the fairy tale kind. "My people are complicated. We believe in genetic purity, in maintaining our species' natural abilities. When I showed an aptitude for piloting and combat, they wanted to breed it into the next generation. They were going to force you to..." "They were going to pair me with a genetically selected mate," she confirmed. "Someone chosen for optimal offspring, regardless of compatibility or consent. And well, I refused. Stole a ship. When they caught up to me, I took an escape pod and hoped for the best." Her lips curved into a wry smile. "And then you found me." The revelation should have made him want to distance himself. A runaway alien princess with powerful enemies was exactly the kind of complication he normally avoided. Instead, he found himself drawing her closer. "Why tell me this?" "Because you understand," she whispered, her body fitting perfectly against his armor. "You know what it's like to be seen as a tool, a means to an end. But when I look at you, I see a man. Not a weapon, not a symbol, just you." The kiss, when it came, felt inevitable, and her lips were softer than he'd imagined, with a slight electric tingle that he attributed to her species' unique biology. His armor suddenly felt too constraining, too much of a barrier between them. Shia seemed to read his mind, her fingers finding the releases for his chest plate with remarkable accuracy. "Let me see you," she breathed against his mouth. "All of you." What followed was a discovery of differences and similarities, of alien and familiar sensations. The emergency lights cast everything in a soft, intimate glow as barriers, both physical and emotional, were slowly stripped away. Their coupling was tender yet passionate, a meeting of equals who had both spent too long hiding their true selves. Afterward, as they lay together in the ship's small sleeping quarters, Shia traced patterns on his bare chest. "I never thought I'd find this with a human," she admitted. "My people believe we're superior in every way, but you've shown me something different, something real." Brad pulled her closer, marveling at how right this felt, despite all the reasons it shouldn't. "What happens now?" "Now?" She propped herself up on an elbow, her hair falling like a dark curtain around them. "Now we figure out how to stay ahead of both your enemies and mine. Together." He knew it wouldn't be simple. They both had dangerous lives, powerful enemies, and complicated pasts. But as Shia smiled down at him, her eyes full of promise and possibility, Brad realized he was ready to face whatever came next, as long as they faced it together. The magnetic storm subsided with the planet's dawn, painting the canyon walls in shades of amber and rose. Brad stood at the ship's viewport, already back in his armor minus the helmet, watching the alien sunrise while his systems ran a final diagnostic. Behind him, Shia was making adjustments to the ship's navigation controls, her movements graceful and precise. The comfortable silence between them was broken by an urgent beeping from the communications array. Brad tensed, recognizing the encrypted frequency. Only his highest-paying clients had access to this channel. "Trouble?" Shia asked, not looking up from her work, but clearly attuned to his sudden shift in mood. "Priority message from a regular client," he replied, accessing the transmission. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a familiar figure, Admiral Thane of the Terran Defense Force. "Reaper," the Admiral's gravelly voice filled the cockpit. "We have a situation that requires your unique capabilities. A prototype stealth vessel was stolen from a classified facility. The thieves are planning to sell it to the Syndicate. We've tracked them to the Nexus trading station in the Orion sector. You have 48 hours before the exchange. Standard fee plus hazard bonus." The message ended abruptly, leaving behind coordinates and mission parameters. Brad studied the data, his jaw tightening. The Nexus was in the opposite direction from the safe harbor he'd planned to take Shia to. "You have to go," she said softly, coming to stand beside him. "It's what you do." He turned to face her, struck again by how her presence had already become something vital to him. "It's too dangerous to take you to the Nexus. The station is crawling with bounty hunters and criminals. If anyone recognizes you, then don't take me." Her fingers traced the edge of his chest plate, sending familiar tingles through his body despite the armor. "Drop me at the nearest neutral port. I can make my way from there." The thought of leaving her vulnerable to her pursuers made his chest tight. "That's not an option." "Why? Because you feel responsible for me now?" There was a challenge in her tone, but also something deeper. "Or because last night meant something more?" Brad caught her hand, holding it against his armor. "You know it did." Their eyes met, and the intensity of their connection sparked between them like a live wire. Without conscious thought, he was pulling her closer, his free hand tangling in her dark hair as their lips met in a passionate kiss. Shia melted against him, her body fitting perfectly against his armored form despite their physical differences. When they finally parted, her yellow lime eyes were glowing with an inner fire that made his pulse race. "Then take me with you," she whispered against his mouth. "I'm not some helpless princess who needs protecting. You've seen what I can do." She had a point. Her piloting skills and technical knowledge would be invaluable for this mission. More than that, the thought of facing it without her by his side felt wrong. "The Nexus is neutral territory," he reasoned aloud. "Your people wouldn't dare make a move there without risking interstellar incident. And I can help you retrieve the prototype," she added eagerly. "My electromagnetic sensitivity would be perfect for tracking a stealth vessel." Brad knew he was rationalizing, letting his growing feelings influence his tactical judgment. But as Shia smiled up at him, her expression full of confidence and trust, he couldn't bring himself to care. "We'll need to make some modifications to your appearance," he said, already planning. "The Nexus may be neutral, but it's not safe. I'm sure we can think of something." Her hand slid down his armor, finding the releases with practiced ease. "But first, we have several hours before we need to leave, and I can think of better ways to spend them than planning." The invitation in her voice was unmistakable. Brad glanced at the viewport, where the alien sun had fully risen, then back at the woman who had somehow become essential to his existence in just a few short days. "The ship's systems still need time to fully recover," he agreed, allowing her to guide him toward the sleeping quarters. What followed was a continuation of their exploration from the previous night, but with a new depth of feeling. Every touch, every kiss was charged with the knowledge that they were choosing this, choosing each other, despite the complications and dangers ahead. Later, as they lay tangled together in the ship's narrow bunk, Shia traced the scars on his chest with gentle fingers. "Now, tell me about your worst mission," she requested suddenly. Brad raised an eyebrow at the unexpected question. "Why?" "Because I want to know you," she said simply. "The real you, not just the legend of the Reaper. And because whatever we face at the Nexus, I want you to know you can trust me to have your back." He was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then slowly, he began to speak about a mission that had gone terribly wrong years ago, about the choices that had led him to become the man he was today. Shia listened without judgment, offering understanding and acceptance that he hadn't known he needed. As the hours passed and they prepared to leave the canyon, Brad realized that something fundamental had shifted between them. This wasn't just about physical attraction or convenient alliance anymore. They were becoming partners in every sense of the word. The mission ahead would test them both. The Nexus was a dangerous place, even for someone with his reputation, and retrieving a stolen prototype while protecting Shia would push his skills to the limit. But as they lifted off, Shia's capable hands on the controls while he planned their approach, Brad felt a certainty he'd never experienced before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The Nexus trading station loomed before them, a massive structure of interconnected rings and spires that sparkled like a jeweled spider's web against the backdrop of space. Brad guided their ship through the docking procedures while Shia made final adjustments to her disguise. "How do I look?" she asked, turning to face him. Brad studied her transformed appearance. They'd used specialized polymers to temporarily alter her skin tone from emerald green to a deep blue, typical of the common Astrian traders. Her distinctive yellow-lime eyes were now hidden behind specialized contact lenses that gave them a more mundane brown color. Her long black hair was styled in the elaborate braids favored by merchant classes. "Different," he admitted, reaching out to touch her altered skin. "But still beautiful." Shia caught his hand, pressing a kiss to his armored palm. "Careful, Reaper. Your soft side is showing." "Only to you," he growled, pulling her close for a quick, fierce kiss before replacing his helmet. "Remember the plan. You're Maya Trell, a freelance tech specialist I've hired for this job. No unnecessary risks." "Yes, sir," she purred, straightening his armor with practiced familiarity. "Though I must say, playing your subordinate will be interesting." The suggestive tone in her voice made him grateful for the helmet hiding his expression. "Focus on the mission." "Oh, I am," she smiled innocently. "I'm just thinking about all the ways I can maintain my cover while driving you crazy." Before he could respond, the docking computer announced their arrival. They separated reluctantly, falling into their professional roles as they prepared to disembark. The Nexus was a riot of sounds, smells, and colors. Relations of every known species mingled in the crowded corridors, conducting both legal and questionable business. Brad led the way through the throng, his imposing presence creating a natural path as others instinctively moved aside. Shia followed close behind, playing her part perfectly, perhaps too perfectly, as she took every opportunity to brush against his armor or lean unnecessarily close while discussing their business. "The prototype's emission signature should be distinctive," she murmured, her breath ghosting across his neck seals as she pretended to consult a datapad, "especially to someone with my particular sensitivities." Brad maintained his stoic posture, even as her proximity sent shivers down his spine. "Any readings yet?" "Nothing concrete. We should check the lower markets. That's where I'm detecting the strongest energy fluctuations." Her hand rested on his arm, a touch that seemed professional to observers but was intimately familiar to him. "Unless you'd prefer to start somewhere more private." "The markets," he said firmly, though his body hummed with awareness of her. "And stop trying to make me break character." Her laugh was low and musical. "But you're so adorably rigid when you're being professional. It makes me want to help you relax." Their banter was interrupted by a commotion ahead. A group of rough-looking spacers was hassling a merchant, their aggressive posturing drawing attention. Brad moved to bypass the situation, but Shia stopped suddenly. "Wait," she whispered. "One of them, their energy signature is off. They're wearing some kind of advanced tech." Brad scanned the group more carefully. The leader, a burly Centaurian, had an unusual shimmer around his edges that might be a concealment field. "Could be our target. Only one way to find out." Before he could stop her, Shia stumbled forward, seemingly tripping into the group. "Oh, I'm so sorry." The Centaurian caught her automatically, his hands lingering longer than necessary on her waist. "No harm done, beautiful. Perhaps I could buy you a drink to help you steady yourself?" Brad felt a surge of possessive anger, but Shia was already extracting herself gracefully. "Thank you, but I'm working." She gestured to Brad. "My employer is very demanding." The Centaurian's eyes narrowed as he noticed the skull-helmeted figure. "The Reaper didn't know he hired help." "Recent policy change." Shia smiled disarmingly. "Though between us, I think he just gets lonely in that big ship of his." The group laughed, tension easing. As they moved on, Shia fell back into step beside Brad. "Definitely our guy. The shimmer is masking a prototype stealth suit, probably testing it before the sale." "Good work," Brad acknowledged, trying to ignore how the Centaurian had touched her. "Though your methods are effective, she suggested innocently. Besides, you're cute when you're jealous. I don't get jealous. No. She pressed closer, ostensibly to avoid a passing crowd. So you weren't thinking about marking your territory back there? The images her words conjured made his armor feel suddenly too tight. We're on a mission. Missions can have pleasant interludes, she murmured. That's why I booked us adjoining rooms at the station's premier hotel. For surveillance purposes, of course. Brad groaned internally. You're impossible. That's not what you said last night, she whispered, then smoothly stepped away as if nothing had happened, leaving him fighting for composure. They spent the next few hours tracking the Centaurian through the station's maze-like markets. Shia's natural abilities proved invaluable, allowing them to maintain distance while following the prototype's energy signature. Her flirtatious act also proved useful, deflecting attention whenever they risked drawing too much notice. As night cycle approached, they found themselves in their adjacent hotel rooms, monitoring their target through sophisticated surveillance equipment. The wall between their rooms seemed to pulse with unspoken tension. A soft knock preceded Shia's entrance. She'd shed her disguise for the privacy of their rooms, her natural green skin gleaming in the starlight from the viewport. The Centaurians settled in for the night. We have hours before anything happens. Brad removed his helmet, drinking in the sight of her true form. We should rest. Tomorrow will be challenging. We should, she agreed, moving closer. But I can think of better ways to pass the time than sleeping. He caught her as she reached for his armor releases, pulling her flush against him. This is dangerous. Anyone could be watching. Let them, she breathed, pressing kisses along his jaw. I'm tired of hiding what I feel for you. Their coupling was different this time, urgent yet tender, filled with the thrill of forbidden passion in enemy territory. Afterward, as they lay tangled in the luxurious hotel sheets, Shia traced the Reaper insignia on his discarded chest plate. Do you ever think about after? She asked softly. After? After this mission. After we stop running. She propped herself up on an elbow, her expression vulnerable. Could the legendary Reaper ever settle for something more permanent? Brad pulled her down for a gentle kiss. With you? I'm already thinking about it. Her brilliant smile was worth any risk, any danger they might face. Tomorrow they would confront their target and complete their mission. But for now, in the artificial night of the space station, they allowed themselves to dream of a future together. The morning cycle on the Nexus brought an unexpected revelation. Brad woke to find Shia in their shared bathroom, her disguise half applied, staring at a medical scanner with wide eyes. Shia! He approached cautiously, noting her trembling hands. She turned to him, her natural green skin showing through patches of the blue disguise. I thought it was just stress from the mission, or maybe the disguise chemicals affecting my system, but... She held out the scanner, its display showing unmistakable readings. Brad felt the world shift beneath his feet as he processed the information. You're pregnant, she whispered, a mix of wonder and fear in her voice. With your child. Our species are compatible in ways my people never imagined possible. He pulled her into his arms, his black armor cool against her partially disguised skin. Are you okay? Is it safe for you to continue the mission? Shia laughed softly, pressing closer to him. Typical human, always worried about protection. My species carries children differently than humans. The embryo is completely shielded in a specialized organ. It's actually safer than a human pregnancy. That's not what I meant, he growled, though his hands gentled as they cradled her face. We're in the middle of a dangerous operation, surrounded by potential enemies. And I've never felt safer, she countered, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Because I'm with you. The kiss deepened, becoming something more heated until the mission computer chimed, reminding them of their target's morning movements. They separated reluctantly, both breathing heavily. We need to finish your disguise, Brad said, though his hands lingered on her waist. The Centaurian will be moving soon. Shia nodded, turning back to the mirror to complete the transformation. Help me with the back? My hands are still shaking. As Brad helped apply the disguise compounds, he noticed subtle changes in her body that he'd missed before. A slight fullness to her curves, a new radiance to her skin beneath the artificial coloring. You're staring, she teased, meeting his eyes in the mirror. You're glowing, he replied honestly. It's distracting. Her smile softened. The legendary Reaper, distracted by an expecting mother? What would your fearsome reputation say? My reputation can go to hell, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her neck. You're more important. They finished the disguise in comfortable silence, both processing the magnitude of their discovery. As Shia adjusted her outfit, now slightly looser to accommodate her changing body, she suddenly laughed. What's funny? I was just thinking, my people were so obsessed with genetic purity, with controlled breeding programs, and here I am carrying a child that's half human, the most wonderfully unpredictable species in the galaxy. Brad donned his helmet, but not before she caught his proud smile. Ready to catch our target? More than ready, she said, straightening her shoulders. This little one deserves a safer galaxy to grow up in. They moved through the station with renewed purpose, tracking the Centaurian's movements with practiced efficiency. Shia's enhanced senses seemed even more acute now, perhaps influenced by her condition. He's meeting someone, she whispered as they observed from a busy marketplace. The energy signature from the prototypes is fluctuating. He's demonstrating it. Brad watched through his helmet's enhanced optics as the Centaurian spoke with a hooded figure. We need to get closer. Leave it to me, Shia smiled, adjusting her dress to emphasize her curves. No one suspects a pregnant woman. Before he could protest, she was weaving through the crowd, pretending to browse nearby stalls while gradually moving closer to their target. Brad followed at a distance, every protective instinct on high alert. Shia's act was flawless. She played the part of a distracted shopper perfectly, occasionally resting a hand on her still flat stomach in a natural gesture that made potential threats dismiss her as harmless. The Centaurian and his contact never noticed her presence, even as she got close enough to overhear their conversation. When she returned to Brad's side, her eyes were bright with excitement. The exchange is happening tonight, she reported, in the station's lower levels, and I know exactly how we're going to intercept it. Back in their rooms planning the operation, Brad couldn't help but marvel at how their lives had changed in such a short time. Shia was reviewing station schematics, her disguise removed for comfort, occasionally rubbing her stomach absently. You're doing it again, she said without looking up. Doing what? Staring at me like I'm some kind of miracle. He moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Maybe you are. You've changed everything. She leaned back against his armor, sighing contentedly. For the better, I hope. For the best, he corrected, then hesitated before adding, marry me. Shia turned in his arms, surprised. What? Marry me, he repeated more firmly. Not because of the baby, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. Her yellow lime eyes filled with tears as she smiled. The fearsome Reaper proposing in a hotel room while planning a dangerous mission. You really are full of surprises. Is that a yes? Instead of answering, she reached for his helmet releases. Once his face was exposed, she pulled him down for a passionate kiss that left no doubt about her answer. Their celebration was brief but intense, both knowing they had a mission to complete. Yet there was a new dimension to their partnership now. Not just lovers or partners, but future parents, future spouses, building something permanent in their dangerous world. As night cycle approached and they prepared for the operation, Shia paused in applying her disguise one last time. Our child will have quite the story to tell someday, conceived between a human mercenary and an alien princess. Born to parents who fell in love after a rescue from a crashed escape pod. Brad smiled behind his helmet. Let's make sure it's a story with a happy ending. The lower levels of the Nexus station thrummed with hidden danger,